I got on the last train after a long day at work. As I got off at the station, I suddenly needed to use the toilet. I don't usually use them, and even for the countryside, it was pretty gross. There were 5 dirty toilets lined up. I stepped before the first one to do my business when I felt eyes on me. I turned to the side, and a man was standing by the very last one. I quickly looked away. There was nobody inside when I entered. I looked back again, and he was gone. Was I imagining things? I finished my business and went to wash my hands. I glanced in the mirror and saw the 5 toilets lined up behind me. A man was standing by the last one. He slowly turned to look at me. Not his body, just his neck. It did a 180-degree turn and glared at me in the mirror. Unable to even scream, I panicked and ran from the toilets all the way home. The next morning, I stepped into the toilets to confirm what happened the night before. Of course, nobody was there. Relieved, I went to do my business, and when I was done, turned around to wash my hands. The blood drained from my face. The sink was still there, but where the mirror should have been, there was nothing. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Last week, I released the 3rd book in the Torihara Files series called Kirei. You can find it on Amazon right now, and even read it for free if you're a member of Kindle Unlimited. This particular story features a woman many of you should be familiar with. A woman with a penchant for trench coats and face masks, and asking people whether they think she's pretty or not. You can check that out on Amazon right now. And don't forget, it's also available to read for free with Kindle Unlimited. Last week was our 50th episode. I'd like to thank everyone for their kind words and support. It really means a lot. And because that story was such a big one, this week we're going to look at a few smaller stories to break things up. When I lived in Japan, I lived alongside Lake Shinji, which is especially famous for its sunsets. Once the sun is gone, however, things quiet down very quickly, and the difference is, literally, like night and day. The once busy paths along the lake become empty, devoid of any life, and with little light from the buildings nearby, it can be a pretty eerie place to be at night. This next story is about a young man who goes running at nights by the river near his house. He notices, however, that people tend to avoid the east side of the river, and this gets him curious. Why do people avoid it? What could be so strange about it that everybody crowds to the other side instead? Find out why in Different to Reality. This happened several years ago. I'd just started university and was living alone for the first time. The train station nearby was a stop for express trains, and there were nice places to eat and hang out all around. Yet, despite all that, the residential area around my house was nice and calm. There was a river with a walking path, and both day and night there were numerous joggers and people walking their dogs. I was a member of the track club in high school, so I used it a lot for running myself. This path had a west side and an east side, but not many people used the east, and it was entirely empty at night. There were no lights along it, so at night it was pitch black. I often wondered why. It was a full moon in the July of my 3rd year at university when something terrifying happened. I was out jogging alongside the river. The full moon is supposed to lift people's spirits, right? I jogged a little faster than usual, listening to my music. I usually took the bright, well-populated path to the west, but on this day, I felt like taking the east path, so I crossed the bridge and went that way instead. A short while later, I sensed something was wrong. At first, I didn't notice anything, but about 15 or 20 minutes later, it was clear as day. I couldn't see anyone. Not a single person at all. It was usual not to see anybody on the east path, but when I looked over at the west path, I couldn't see anyone there either. Scared, I planned to cross over the next bridge I saw and picked up speed. Then I saw someone up ahead. It looked like a mother and child. As I got about 50 meters away, the mother smacked the child over the head, and the girl fell down. Child abuse? Or was she just angry at something? I stopped in my tracks. She was probably just angry. I sat on a nearby bench and waited for them to get further away. When I looked over again, the mother was sitting on top of the girl, furiously hitting her in the head. She was probably smashing her face into the ground. That is child abuse, I thought, and stood up, but for some reason, I couldn't move. About 10 seconds later, I noticed that I couldn't hear either of their voices anymore. After what I just saw, you'd expect to hear a child's crying, right? What the hell? I thought, when I saw the mother dragging the limp girl by the hair towards me. Oh, I gotta get out of here. But my legs still refused to move. It was like they'd forgotten how to. When the mother reached me, she looked up and screamed, "What are you looking at?" Her voice was so shrill and loud that it was like it was going to burst my eardrums. It was then that I realized they weren't human. The mother's eyes were pure black. It wasn't like the white part of the eyes was black, but more that there was no eyeball at all. It's hard to explain, but it's like her eyes were darkness. The kid was skin and bones, her skin purple with a red rash all over it. The smell was so bad that it made me want to puke. Before I knew it, I was running full speed away. A station came into view. Thankfully, a well-populated station. My lungs burned like crazy. A short while after that night, I went out drinking with a friend who grew up in the area. I never intended to say anything, but I was kinda drunk, so I asked him a question. "You know that east path by the river? Why does nobody use it?" This is what he told me. "Do you know the bench on the east side of the river? 13 or 14 years ago, they found the corpse of a girl there. The police got a call from her mother the night before, alerting them that she hadn't returned home. The girl had gone out to play by the river, alone, and slipped, smacking her head on the ground. According to someone who lived nearby, when they found the girl's body, the mother screamed something. The father was gone. Might have been divorce or something. So things were tough, and the mother worked late each night to feed her. She was doing her best for her. How sad. In the end, losing her only daughter sent her mad, and the mother killed herself." Hearing his story, I couldn't help but think that the reality might have been a little different. There's a section on Google Maps in Tokyo where you can see a bunch of people looking at the camera with pigeon masks on. If you continue past them and turn around, they're still looking at you, all heads turned in your direction. It's both hilarious and kinda creepy, and just one of many strange things you can find zooming through Japan's streets in Street View. The guy from this next story uses Street View to find out where he needs to go for work the next day, but finds something much stranger than pigeon heads looking at him. Something that might actually be following him home. Find out what happens in Street View. You've probably heard of Google Street View before, and how they blur people's faces that are captured by the camera. But if you happen to come across someone's face who isn't blurred, you should be careful. This is my true story. By the time I realized it, it was midnight and I was all alone at work. Wanting to look up the location I had to visit the next day, I grabbed my computer and opened up the map. I put in the address and confirmed where I had to go. I grabbed the little person cursor and dropped it onto the map, but for some reason, it dropped me in some other place, a little further away. I was on a large pedestrian crossing on a main street, and there was a woman whose face wasn't blurred. Something was clearly off. Her face was white, her neck bent, and she was standing strangely. It was just like a doll being held up by a thread. My heart pounded. I was scared and certain that I didn't want to see anything further. But I was also curious, which ended up winning out. I zoomed in. The woman became clearer. I regretted looking. Her neck wasn't bent. It was broken. Her face looked at her own back. She appeared to be glaring. Our eyes met. Her mouth moved. Or so I thought. Then the screen went black. My own face reflected back in the darkness. I felt certain that if I looked away for even just a second, that woman would appear in the screen behind me. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I couldn't even blink. I stared myself down, my heart beating like crazy. I don't think it was for that long, but then the screen came back on. The page I'd been on was gone. Relieved, I pulled out a cigarette. I had no idea whether any of what had just taken place was real. After I was done with my cigarette, I left. I arrived home and climbed into bed, but I couldn't forget that woman's face, and I couldn't sleep. A short while later, I woke up. I couldn't move. It was the first time I'd ever experienced sleep paralysis in my life. I thought about what to do when I heard the sound of the front door closing. Footsteps echoed down the hall. I lived alone. No matter how you looked at it, there was no way anyone could get in. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. I couldn't turn over, nor even open my eyes. The footsteps got closer. The sliding door to my room opened. They were coming closer. I could sense someone behind me. Could hear the sound of their labored breathing. It slowly became clearer and more distinct. They were right there. My heart pounded so wildly, I feared that it would escape through my throat. I've no doubt that I was thinking of something, but I was in such a panic that I can't remember thinking about anything. Then, a warm breath brushed past my cheek. "It hurts," a woman's voice whispered by my ear. I could move again. At the exact same moment, the presence disappeared. I dove under the blankets, unable to stop shaking and piece together what had just happened. Unable to bear it, I turned the TV and all the lights on, and watched TV until morning. I got ready for work and drove out to the location I had to be at. Work proceeded smoothly, and during my break, I went to the convenience store to buy a coffee. I passed the place that woman was standing in the street view. There was a sign there. It mentioned the time and day, and that there was a hit-and-run accident. The police were looking for witnesses. It was the exact same time I'd seen the woman in the computer. Only once in my life, that I can remember anyway, have I passed the scene of an accident where somebody died. Police were standing around and there was a body beneath a blue tarp. I was only young at the time, early teens I think, but the image of the blue tarp has stuck with me till this day. There's something final and cold about it. In this next story, a man is on his way home from shopping when he spots the police putting a tarp up. He gets a glimpse behind it, however, and ends up taking home more than he bargained for. Find out what happens in Accident. This is a true story that happened last year. I saw a collision on my way back from Costco. The police were doing something, and through the blue tarp, I saw a lump of something red and black. I soon realized it was a human head. I did my best to try and pass without looking, but I lost to my own curiosity and took another look. The eyes, which had been closed, were now open. What the? I thought, but I tried to put it out of my mind and went home. That night, while I was in bed, I noticed what felt like someone walking around me. I tried not to look, but I was so scared that I couldn't sleep. The next day, and the day after that, the same thing continued. I couldn't get any sleep. I asked one of my friends if he could have someone come over and take a look at my house. A person he knew with a strong sense for the supernatural. The moment he arrived at my house, he instantly refused to go inside. "What is it?" I asked, and he said whatever was haunting me was pretty powerful, and even just looking at it was revolting. I asked what I should do, and he gave me an address to visit. It turned out to be a shrine deep in the mountains. An old guy stepped outside to greet me. "Come in," he said, so I followed him. "Did you see something?" he asked. "See what?" He sighed. "The day before all this started, did you see something?" "I saw a dead person's head," I told him. "Anything else?" "The eyes opened," I said. It might already be too late," he replied. According to him, the head I'd looked at had possessed me, and he was glad I'd come to see him. I was in tears. After a person dies, Their soul remains in their body for a brief period, and apparently, when someone takes their liking, they can possess and then kill them. What should I do? I asked. You haven't seen it yet, so don't worry, he replied. I sighed in relief, but he continued. One day you will be able to see it, but as long as you keep this charm on you, you'll be okay. I couldn't see the spirit at the time, but if I lost or damaged the charm, it would come for me. So trembling, I took the charm back home with me. Then, last week, I saw it. The entire time I've been writing this story, it's been standing behind me. What's going to happen to me now? I worked at several schools in Japan while they were either being renovated or knocked down and rebuilt entirely. There's pretty much no interruption to the learning process, other than some noise outside, and things tend to go pretty quickly and efficiently. That is, unless you're a teacher looking for a parking spot, or one of the unfortunate clubs who now has to train in a different place, because now the school grounds are taken up with workers. But Japanese schools are renovated quite often, and only occasionally are they knocked down and rebuilt from scratch. Usually, they'll add to the existing school, or only fix whatever section is no longer usable. In the case of this next story, one particular school with a very long history has some strange design quirks that proves it still has some secrets hidden on its grounds. Deadly secrets. Find out what in Observation Shed. The high school I went to was about 120 years old. To the untrained eye, the curves of the buildings that had been built and rebuilt numerous times could only be described as strange. Although they're rare now, there was a one-story building with stairs inside, leading right up to the roof at the end of the hall. In another building, the door to the music room, which is right by the entrance, was buried, so nobody can get inside. From the outside, it appeared to be boarded up by numerous plywood planks. Yet the strangest of all has to be the extremely weird observation shed. I travelled quite a bit to get to school, but every now and then I stayed with friends who lived close to the school. One day, we decided to go stay in that shed. At first glance, it looked just like any other house. It was about 8 tatami mats large, with an old phone and a small kitchen inside. As for why it was called the observation shed, that night I put my life on the line to find out. Myself and one other friend decided to spend the night. We were carrying on like it was a school trip as we lay our beds out. We chatted as we ate dinner, and then suddenly the phone rang. Scared, we picked it up, but it just turned out to be the janitor. Some other girls had heard all the noise we were making, and he was concerned. He warned us not to be too noisy, and we went to hang up. As we did, he continued. I forgot to mention it, but make sure you close the curtain on the west side before you go to sleep. Okay, we answered and hung up, but we had no idea what he meant. There was a graveyard behind the school, but that wasn't to the west of us, so we thought it strange, and my friend opened the curtain. There was an old well decorated in hemp rope right there. The school was shaped like a U, and the shed blocked view of the well from it. I got chills down my spine the moment I saw it. It's kinda creepy, I said, and we ended up pushing our beds together to sleep. How long did we sleep? I woke up, the top of my shoulders cold and trembling. I glanced over, and my friend was gone. There was no toilet, so I thought she must have gone to use the teacher's toilets. I waited, but she showed no signs of return. I opened the door and looked outside, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Where on earth did she go? Worried, I returned to the room and looked over at the window. My friend was standing by the well, in her underwear, her hands moving by her waist. She really went out there to pee? I wondered in amazement. I went to close the curtain when I was overwhelmed by this strange feeling. I looked over at the well again and almost screamed. She wasn't peeing. She was wrapping the rope around her waist. She squatted and tied the other end of the rope to a large stone. I was speechless. Then, a white hand reached out of the well. It grabbed around as though looking for something, and then finally grabbed the rope. My friend hung her head and didn't show any response. The hand slowly pulled the rock closer. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. It's gonna take her, I thought, when the phone started to ring and brightly lit up the darkness. I fell backwards onto the bed. It was like I had overcome the paralysis gripping my body, and I flew outside barefoot to save my friend. I somehow got her back inside. I called to her for God knows how long, and then finally she seemed to come to, before bursting into tears. Released from the fear gripping me, I burst into tears with her. We decided to call someone for help, and picked up the phone. This time, however, we both fell back on the beds. The entire phone was gone, and not only that, but the part where the line connected was empty. We later discovered that soon after the school was built, student after student killed themselves at that very well. They tried to cover it, but the workers started to die, one after the other, so they gave up. They decided to hide it from the public eye instead when renovating the school, but still, people threw themselves down it. So, they built the observation shed instead. However, the man on watch in the shed threw himself down the well as well. So in the end, they abandoned it. So, how did we receive the call telling us to keep the curtain closed? And was it really the same guard who used to work in the observation shed? As of recording, we are just a few short dollars away from unlocking longer episodes of Kowabana for all. If you'd like to support the show, get up to 29 bonus episodes, as well as early, ad-free access, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin right now. Every bit counts and helps me continue making this show for everyone. And don't forget, the third standalone novel in the Torihara Files series, Kirei, is out on Amazon right now, which you can also read for free with Kindle Unlimited, so don't miss out. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.